you are?
Sure. Good morning. My name is Dr. Avery Smith.
Why are you here today, Dr. Smith?
Well, ma'am, I administered the breath alcohol concentration test to Danny Dawson.
I want to talk about that test in just a little while.
Okay.
First, I want to talk about how you're qualified to give that test.
Sure.
Where did you go to school to learn how to do that?
I went to Gonzaga University, where I received my Bachelor's of Science in Biochemistry. After that, I went to Washington University, and I received my Master's and my Doctorate in Biostatistics.
What do you do now?
I am the director for the Women's Department Board of Forensics, and I'm also a breath testing specialist.
You said you performed a breath alcohol concentration test. Did I hear you right?
Yes.
What experience do you have with that test here in our state, Midlands?
At the risk of sounding a little full of myself, I wrote the protocol for that test here in Midlands. I train everyone to do that.
Okay. Well, what kind of facts and data do you need to run that test?
Ma'am, all I need is my machine and a willing subject.
What kind of machine did you use in the defendant's case?
The Intoxilizer 8000.
And did the defendant give you those breath samples?
Yes, she did.
What kind of method or procedure do you use to test those breath samples with your machine?
Well, I followed my standard checklist.
What's that?
It's a list of things that I have to make sure that I've done in order to ensure the accuracy of my tests.
What's on that checklist?
I have to make sure that my machine has been calibrated properly. I've got to make sure that the subject has been observed for 15 minutes. And then I've got to make sure that those breath samples are accurate and correct.
Did you do that in the defendant's case? Did you apply your method to the facts?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Dr. Smith, were you able to reach a conclusion to a reasonable degree of scientific and medical certainty?
I wouldn't be here if I had.
I want to talk about that test now. Why might you have to perform this kind of test on someone?
When a subject has been, or a person, has been suspected of driving under the influence of alcohol or failed sobriety tests, the arresting officers bring them to me. And I give those arresting officers concrete proof as to whether or not someone has been driving under the influence of alcohol.
Was that the case with the defendant?
Yes, the arresting officer, Officer Foster, brought Danny Dawson in after failing 3 field sobriety tests.
What did you do when the arresting officer brought the defendant into the station?
Well, I sat Ms. Dawson down and I spoke with Officer Foster and saw if he observed her for 15 minutes prior to her arrival.
The witness is about to testify to hearsay. Officer Foster's statements about the observation period.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
Under Rule 702, on direct examination, we're allowed to talk about experts' underlying facts and data so long as the prejudicial effect does not substantially outweigh the probative value. The probative value here is very important. It's important for us to know that her test was reliable. The observation period that Officer Foster performed is part of her underlying facts and data the jury needs to know about to assess the reliability of her test.
Your Honor, the fact is that the observation period that Officer Foster reported to her that she is about to testify to is hearsay, and it's more prejudicial than probative in that Officer Foster is not present for cross-examination, and we do not actually know whether or not the observation period was conducted in the way that she is about to report.
Well, I believe the issue is whether she believed it was the observation period had been followed. Is that correct?
Your Honor, in the event that she testifies that it's only her belief and she does not actually know whether or not the observation period was conducted properly, then I have no objection.
Do you have an issue with confining the testimony to that?
Well, yes, Your Honor. Dr. Smith is allowed to give her expert opinion based on her underlying facts and data provided to her by Officer Foster under Rule 703. I believe she's allowed to assess the reliability of Officer Foster's observation time. She's trained and she's written the protocol for the observation time required for this specific test.
Your Honor, if I may respond.
You may.
The only analysis of the observation period conducted by Dr. Foster that she could possibly give is a hearsay statement and a recitation of what she was told. She was not actually present during that observation period.
I'm going to allow the testimony in for as much as the expert witness, or what the expert witness is basing her conclusions on. And I'll allow you to cross-examine based on that. Please proceed.
You were telling us about Officer Foster's observation time. You talked to him about that?
Yes, when an officer brings someone in to take my test, I have to sit down and make sure that they've been observed for 15 minutes. And then I sit down with the subject myself, and I speak with them for a number of minutes.
So what did you learn from Officer Foster?
Officer Foster informed me that Miss Dawson had failed 3 field sobriety tests after she was going home from a bar. And then he asked me if I could perform my test to make sure whether or not she was intoxicated.
What did you do after you spoke with the arresting officer?
I spoke with Miss Dawson myself.
After you spoke with Miss Dawson, what did you do?
Well, I made sure my machine was running properly. I had just finished calibrating it that night. And then I obtained that first breath sample.
Now, earlier you said you need 2 breath samples. Did you get a second one?
Yes, I did.
Dr. Smith, what was the defendant's blood alcohol concentration on the night of September 25th, 2010?
Miss Dawson's blood alcohol concentration was at 0.19.
Dr. Smith, your experience here in Midlands, what is the legal limit in our state?
The legal limit is 0.08. Miss Dawson's blood alcohol concentration was over twice that.
Pass the witness, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.